Welcome to A Place for Film, the IU Cinema podcast. On this week's episode, we're talking about Home Movie Day. All right, hello everyone. Welcome to the show. My name is Andy Hunsucker.
And I'm Jason Thompson.
And this week we're talking about Home Movie Day, which we'll explain the event because it's not an obvious event. You hear Home Movie Day and you sort of get the idea, but we'll explain the importance of it here. And we have two people here to talk to us about it. We have Brian Graney, the archivist from the Black Film Center Archive. Thanks for joining us, Brian.
Oh, thanks for having me.
We also have James Paasche, who is the organizer of Home Movie Day and a CMCL grad student who's been on the show many, many times. James, thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me again.
Okay, so let's talk about Home Movie Day. And for those of our listeners or viewers who are not longtime listeners, we talked about this last year. But we want to talk about it again because some people might be behind the curve on this. So what is Home Movie Day?
Let's see. Well, it's an open screening event where we set up 8mm, Super 8, and 16mm film projectors, not equipment commonly in operation in most homes, but most homes do still have boxes of home movies. So this gives people an opportunity to bring them in, see them on the big screen at IU Cinema, and share them with other people in the community, which is more entertaining than you might imagine.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes.
Yeah.
And also talk to archivists and film preservationists on hand here at IU about how they can care for their home film collections in the long run.
Okay. So describe, James, how is the event going to be run at the cinema? What do people just show up and bring movies, or what happens?
Yeah, that's what's happened. Basically, we have a few things ready on our end of things, some films. I'm sure Brian will talk about some of the things that are going to be shown. But yeah, half of it is stuff that we kind of have ready, and the other half is made up of whatever people bring in. And it can vary in quality and subject matter and quality of the film, the technical skill of the operator. I mean, it's really, I said this last year and I'll say it again, it's the weirdest day you're going to have at a cinema because not only, a lot of times the audience doesn't know what they're getting into exactly, but this is a day where the programmers have no idea what they're getting into as well.
Even the people that bring this stuff, they just have no idea, and then you ask them to narrate, and they're just like, oh my gosh, that's my aunt that I haven't, talked to in 20 years or whatever, and that's what I found fascinating.
Yeah.
We're just having, because a lot of these were, didn't have any audio.
Personal. Yeah.
And there's personal movies, and they're just, doing commentary, and that's what I really found fascinating.
Yeah, we did, this is the 5th year it's been at IU, and last year was the first year where we did that.
Yeah, that was
where
really
we had
cool.
a mic and we passed it around to the people who had brought in the film. And you're absolutely right. There were some people that said things like, oh yeah, that's my aunt. I've never seen her like this, or something like akin to that. And that added portion of it, not only does it kind of fit the history of home movies and how home movies were shared in the home, people pointing at the screen or laughing or something like that, but it adds something to the live event of Home Movie Day to have the people kind of narrating things. And I remember this older woman was showing footage of her and her sister last year, and was just chuckling the whole time, and it really lent this feel of like it's intimate but public at the same time. It's a really neat event. So we will have a microphone where people can narrate their films. As Brian mentioned, 8mm, 16mm, Super 8, and we'll also have DVD and VHS capabilities. So if you have old films that you have already had transferred onto DVD or VHS, we can play those as well.
Yeah. I still haven't found that Halloween VHS.
Yeah, we talked about our fantasy of what we would show. I do have my my musical that I did find it. I was going to show it to a friend, and I still have it. It's sitting on it's sitting within reach. Not of here, but within like my desk. I could reach over and pick it up.
So you're bringing it then?
Well, I'm going to be in Chicago. So
you could hand it to me beforehand. We'll show it. How's that?
And that way you're not there to embarrass yourself.
No, I want to see.
And I'll just make it up.
I want to see the reaction. I want to see what people think. Because I'm a show off. That's why we do the show. Because I want attention.
Yeah,
it's all about me.
It is.
I need people to know what's what I'm doing. That's what's important to me. So why home movie day? Why is this important? Why do we want to keep this going?
Well, when we started the event 10 years ago now, it was originated by a group of 5 archivists who had a shared concern for home movies and were considering the climate for them. A lot of people were having their films transferred by companies that were making bold claims to preserve your family footage forever by burning it to DVD, and even just transferring to VHS before that had been thought of as preservation, which wasn't the case at all. We've got 16 millimeter films from 1923 that we can still put on a projector and see today, and we can't really say that for all of even the DVDs that were burned 5-10 years ago. So we wanted to catch people at that moment before they make this decision to throw away their films and just stick with the DVD, to let them know that that with proper care, film can outlast any modern media that they might transfer their films to. But also there's just this widespread misconception that home movies are deathly dull and that you see the same subjects over and over again. It's true that you see the same subjects over and over again, but always in a unique manner, because honestly, no two people are exactly alike. And so you might see 100 Christmas morning films and they're all going to be different. And chances are all of them are going to be entertaining and charming in some way.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's what I think is interesting. I had my Christmas traditions. Everyone else's are totally different, you know, and that's what's interesting about those films in particular.
Yeah, and oftentimes, I think part of this is a preservational push to recognize that we need to take care of film, all kinds of films, not just amateur films, but Hollywood films as well. But also a recognition of the fact that personal histories are important in considering regional, local, national, international histories. And if you think about amateur film in a much larger context than just the Christmas films, which those ones matter as well. But if you think about the Zapruder film, the Rodney King videotapes, these films tend to have some kind of historical weight to them.
Oh, yeah.
And as Brian will talk about some of the films we're going to show this home movie day, they offer us glimpses into lives that we don't hear about in our larger versions of history.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating to see the way people dressed in a certain era, or their hairstyles. And you know the big general view of that era, but to see the particulars of that era, it just enriches our historical understanding of our past in a really interesting and kind of fun way. It's fun to see these things.
Yeah, well, I mean, I talked to a friend. I've talked to a friend about this, and he always says, "Oh, well, but this was the way things were in the 40s and 50s." And I'm like, okay, but you've seen the TV version and the film version. There was never a world like that. That world did not exist.
Yeah.
But this is something that you can actually see how the world actually worked and what people wore, not the Hollywood version of what people wore, not the Hollywood version. Well, most of these don't have sound, but not that. And there was, what was the film that was added to the Congressional Archive not too long ago? It was a home movie. It was the Japanese internment camp film.
The Topaz film.
Yeah. So this guy just had a camera in the Japanese internment camps during World War II, and it's a home movie. But that's what it is. It's a home movie. But the fact that it was in that place at that time gives it the weight.
Yeah, and it's really a kind of nice way to make a lot of the arguments we make in an educational setting about the importance of context. These films are highly contextual. And so the details or the ideas that you pull out of them, the feelings that you pull out of them, not all family films are the same and where everyone's cheery on Christmas morning. You can see the daughter looking strangely at the father or something like that and read into them things that might not be factual but kind of psychological or something like that. It's a fun exercise in reading films.
Yeah. So let's talk about the stuff that is actually coming. Now, Brian, you said that you had some specific things that you were bringing.
Yeah, not from the Black Film Center archive, but a couple of films from other collections that we're profiling at Home Movie Day this year. First, there's the collection of Solomon Sir Jones, which was recently made available freely online by Yale University's Beinecke Library. And that's a collection of home movies shot by an African-American Baptist minister over the years 1924 to 1928. He was based in Muskogee, Oklahoma, and let's see. He was based in Muskogee, Oklahoma, and in addition to being a preacher, was an entrepreneur, local businessman, and traveled extensively throughout the country, including to Indianapolis. So we've got 3 reels out of the collection featuring scenes in Indianapolis and the African-American community in the 20s. It seems that he had some business dealings with Madam C.J. Walker and her enterprises in Indianapolis. So there's a lot of footage of that. A convention of Madam Walker representatives meeting, scenes at her administrative offices, scenes of the then brand new Walker Theater, and other scenes around Indianapolis, including about 5 minutes of a Masonic funeral procession.
Oh, wow.
Which is one of 2 funeral films that we'll be showing.
Okay.
Death in the Afternoon.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, what is this other one that we're talking about?
Well, the other one is a DVD transfer of an amateur video that a colleague of mine at the Black Film Center volunteered to bring in.
Okay.
Just when she heard about the event, this memorial service footage was one of the first things that she thought to contribute.
Okay. So this first film you talked about was from the 20s. I mean, how rare is it to have a home movie from the 20s?
Less rare than you'd think.
Okay.
From the introduction of 16 millimeter, it was pretty popular for people to shoot home movies if they were of a certain level of affluence. So it's rare to see much economic or racial diversity in the earliest home movies. That really changed once 8 millimeter was introduced in the early 30s, and it changed tremendously with the introduction of Super 8 in the mid-'60s.
Brian, I'm getting the sense that you have been involved with this for much longer than recently. So how long have you been involved?
From the start, I co-founded it with 4 friends and colleagues in 2002 over beers. Basically, we met at the conference of the Association of Moving Image Archivists, and outside the conference just went out and talked about our mutual interest in home movies and considered an event like this, inspired in part by others like it, like Super 8 Day, and other open screening events that had been held for experimental filmmakers, independent filmmakers, and figured that between the 5 of us, we were located all around the country, and the few other people we knew with a strong interest in home movies, that we had at least enough people to launch it in the first year and then see if it took. But within no time, we had over 25 events internationally. And in the first year, I think we had maybe 5 countries involved with a number of events in Japan alone. Japan's been a really strong supporter from the start.
Interesting. Yeah. So let's talk about some of the things you've seen at Home Movie Day that you've particularly liked or found to be surprising or particularly fascinating.
Oh, let's see. Our Sorry, I'm going to have to pause to rack my brain on this one.
James.
Well, I have a good one. Well, a colleague of ours, Andy Urich, brought a film, and it was this Jewish family in the 50s. I'm pretty sure it was the 50s. I don't know if he had an exact date. And they were having a family party, and there were drinks going around, and everyone was obviously in good spirits and having a good time.
I remember this story now.
and like there was this cut, probably loading another bunch of film into the camera, and then when it comes back, the mother is in blackface, and the father is wearing a Hitler mustache. And goose stepping around, and this party obviously took a turn at some point, and I had
missing,
and I, ostensibly I'm the one that had organized this event. I knew basically the order of what films were going on and that kind of thing, but had no clue that was going to happen, and that's my favorite part of this is not knowing what's going to happen. Like when I tell friends about the event and they're like, "Oh, I got this thing and I want to bring it in," and they give me the whole story. At some point, I just want to stop them and say, "Don't tell me." Like, that's part of the joy of this. Is it's really a surprise.
Yeah.
So that's been my favorite one so far. But I've learned a little bit from almost all of them. I have some footage that I've shown in the past from my mother-in-law growing up in Oklahoma in the late 40s, early 50s, and that was really weird to see, oh, wow, that's what my children might look like, right?
Yeah.
Those kind of weird thoughts about history and family and those things kind of tend to pop up at this event. Mm-hmm. And it's a really, except for that one I just described, a pretty family-friendly event.
Yeah.
We've had some children show up, and it's usually an okay thing.
Yeah. So what do you have, James, do you have people that come in every year and have a new movie every year? Do you encourage people to bring the same stuff, or do you want to see new stuff every year?
I would like to see new stuff. We do have this one gentleman who's brought in the same thing and wants us to fast forward through it. He doesn't want us to watch it as it's happening. He wants us to fast forward through the whole thing because it's early footage of his parents, I believe, and there's not a whole lot going on. It's just kind of the family stuff, and so that's a little strange to me, but that's fine. But we don't really care what people bring in. The variety of it is part of the attraction of the event, I think. There's no set theme necessarily this year.
One thing that just reminded me of is that the theme is always amateur and home film. In Los Angeles, where the event is, I think, still being held at the Academy Film Archive, there would occasionally be independent filmmakers who would show up with what was clearly not an amateur film, but more of a calling card so that they could put it on their CV that their film had been screened at the Academy for Motion Picture Arts and Sciences.
Oh, wow.
I think that's kind of exploiting the opportunity that the event presents.
I would say so. But I would think in L.A. you've got the kids and grandkids of maybe some really interesting, well-known people that you might come across some of that sort of thing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
There was actually some really great and surprising stuff that turned up in L.A. One from Disney Animation Studios in, I think, the 40s, which had, I guess, what you'd call kind of a Mad Men vibe. They had, body Tinkerbells hanging from the ceiling, and they were all drinking martinis. This is like the unofficial view of Disney Studios.
Yeah. Oh, wow. I really wish
actually some of my favorite stuff to go along that line, though. Obviously it's not about people that are trying to be pro filmmakers bringing in and showing their reels. But we did have someone that brought in a film, like a spy film they made as like an 11 or 12-year-old with their friends.
Yeah.
And it was obviously amateur. And so we highly encourage those kind of things. If you have those skeletons in your closet, please bring those, because they're beautiful, homemade action film or something like this, and like trying to jump across the hood of a car and getting caught halfway through, that kind of stuff. It's just fantastic.
That sounds really good, because it's something that somebody clearly cared a lot about. Even if they didn't know what they were doing, at least they really wanted something they had an idea, they wanted to accomplish something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, one thing that I've just been rolling through my head, and it's not even in the form of a question, it's more of a thought, is obviously, as technology, accelerates forward into the future, people are basically walking around with video cameras in their pockets.
Yeah.
So what does that do for home movies?
That's a great question. That's part of my work here as a student is on amateur films shot by soldiers during Vietnam. And obviously, part of the reason I got into that subject was because there's so much stuff happening now with phones and various kinds of equipment with our soldiers all over the world. And I don't know if it necessarily changes the making of the film. Maybe it makes it a little bit more easier with the accessibility of technology. But I think the way that technology has shaped it is more the distribution of these kind of films, that we're able to share them a little more quickly and easily.
Well, it also makes me think there's a lot more just sort of unnecessary stuff that gets put on the internet that you kind of have to wade through to find the the diamond in the rough.
Yeah.
Because there's people that just make money purely on just showing people falling over and getting hurt and stuff like that. And sure, that's great to see, but I mean, this other stuff kind of gets thrown on the wayside. That's kind of just my thought process. It's just kind of weird. It's like it's accessible, but at the same time,
there's too much of it. Maybe
too much of it.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a legitimate question to ask. I don't know if we've had enough time to develop the answers yet. I mean, we're still stuck in this kind of revolution of the speed of a lot of this stuff.
Well, I think with home movies shot on film, there was always an economic factor because film cost money.
Sure.
And so people would be very selective about what they shot and bring it out mostly on special occasions to document just celebrations and special events. And so with digital media, there's nothing restraining the filmmaker.
Sure.
So it's, I think there are assets in that lack of restraint and in the ubiquity of recording devices, but it definitely does make it qualitatively different from what you see recorded on film.
Yeah, I think of the fact that any concert I go to now is recorded by someone in the audience all the way through,
Well,
and so there's no
experience in that matter, because all you're seeing for yourself is just a bunch of cameras in front of your face.
Yeah, and then personally in the live situation, it's a different experience.
Yeah, people aren't, and that's one of my pet peeves when I go to concerts is just seeing a bunch of cell phones and nobody actually paying attention to what's going on in front of them. It's like, so you're going to live this later on? Like, why not experience it now and then maybe get lucky and find somebody else that decided to waste their time and film it and then watch it from their perspective.
No, you're absolutely right. And I think Brian's comment about selection is a big thing because, you're right. You have a 2.5-minute reel of film that costs some money and you can only do so much with it. You're going to tend to bring it out in those important events like weddings and birthdays and that kind of stuff.
That's what was so exciting about
nowadays you just press and let it go.
Well, that's what was so exciting about VHS. You could reuse it. So a lot of my family films, you'll just, be watching something, all of a sudden it just stops and then something else is playing and it's like an episode of MASH or something. You're just like, why is this on here?
And those instances are really beautiful sometimes when all of a sudden that home movie meets up with MASH and you're like, well, how did that work together? And you try to recreate the event in your mind and there's some kind of something you could do with it intellectually.
There's a ton of those in our family collection. I know, they'll be labeled one thing and then they're like something completely different. But that was so nice about the tabs on those VHS tapes. You could preserve the one movie you never wanted just by breaking off that tab, and nobody could ever record their favorite episode of whatever show was on.
Yeah.
So because we got burned on that many times, and there was many an argument about that. But that was just what was refreshing about going from film to VHS or even Betamax at the time is that you could just reuse it if it didn't work, or if it was something that you could get rid of.
And also the length of those things. So you could have, one videotape of a couple hours of home movies, not just, 2.5-minute snippet or something like that. Yeah.
It makes me think, with changing technology, it makes me think about something Joe Swanberg said when he was here. He said, I make my films with these cameras because that's what people make the most movies with. That's the sort of technology that the regular person would have available to them. And I guess it just makes me think about, it made me think that he really hit on something there, the way he made his films. And his films almost play like something happened to me in real life, but I'm going to make the fictional version of this film. Is that the future of the home movie? Somebody like Joe Swanberg coming along and fictionalizing his whole life?
Well, I think that it plays often like tensions between pro and amateur film, and the fact that nowadays, because of the democratizing of equipment and technology that's been going on obviously much longer than the digital, as Brian alluded to, there's some trade-offs that happen when you're mixing, is this a semi-professional film or is this an amateur, and those kind of that black and white of professional and amateur. I think it's just really a lot of gray, murky ground nowadays in between. And it's really lovely in a way to explore that. And there are plenty of filmmakers that play with the home movie kind of style. I see it all the time in television shows now, especially a lot of police procedurals. Homeland was a great example of major plot points being kind of done through amateur eyes. So it's out there.
Yeah, and a lot of sitcoms use that as a device. It's like, what was it like for the characters in the past? We want to learn about them from like 20 years ago. So they play like, oh, we found this home movie of what we were like back then. Yeah,
I've seen 30 Rock had a whole episode about Jack and his home movies. It's ubiquitous now that is a device for filmmakers to go and talk about the past somehow. Is just throw up that footage, and you could even, there's programs now where you could make the footage scratchy and all that kind of stuff and make it look like a home movie.
Exactly. All right. Well, do you guys have any final thoughts about Home Movie Day?
No, I don't.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Just, it's a lovely day at the theater. It's free.
Yeah.
There's no telling what you're going to get. Last year we had a gentleman show up who was kind of actually a semi-pro guy who had shot a bunch. Do you remember the footage he shot of the Little 500 in the 70s? And saw all the crazy costumes and stuff people were wearing back then?
He was like a news producer somewhere and was shooting B-roll, and he had all that.
B-roll from his, and there's like bloopers and stuff from his trying to do the ends and beginnings of these reports. I remember that. That was really
cool. And like having that stumble into your laps and seeing what Bloomington looked like at that time is it's fascinating.
Yeah. All right. Well, Home Movie Day, October 20th at 3 p.m. People do need tickets, correct?
Yeah,
but you can get them at the door.
Yeah, you could just show up if you like.
Yeah.
I think we're opening the doors a little bit early for film inspection, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Do they need to like email anyone to say, "Hey, I'm bringing a movie," or they just show up with the movie?
They can email the cinema. There's email set up for that. They can also just show up. We'll have people there to inspect films. If people bring actual reels, we'll have people to inspect them and make sure that the reels won't be harmed during the showing of the film.
Yeah.
If they have just DVD or VHS, you don't even need to show up early. Really. You can just bring it in.
All right. Cool. All right. October 20th, 3 p.m. at the cinema. Home Movie Day.
Yay.
Should be fun. Sorry I'm missing it, actually. But that's just the way the schedule worked out. But
give us your home movies. We'll show them without you.
If I can track down that one, I will definitely bring it.
Please.
Yeah.
I'm still looking for it.
All right. All right. So we'll get out of here. Thank you, James. Thank you, Brian, for having this conversation with us. We appreciate it. Thanks for doing all the work with Home Movie Day.
Mm-hmm.
So
thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks for helping us get the word out.
Definitely. All right. So we'll get out of here. I'm Andy.
And I'm Jason.
This has been, and always will be, A Place for Film. A Place for Film is recorded at WFIU Studios in Bloomington, Indiana.